Today I'm going to take this book that I found at the car boot sale for just £1, and I'm going to turn it into a Christmas journal. I absolutely loved the imagery of it. It gave me such beautiful old-fashioned, old world, Victorian kind of vibes, and I decided that I definitely had to use it and take it apart to turn it into something new. So I decided to get it, and what I'm going to do is take out the pages of the book and save the covers. So, in order to do this, because I'm lucky and this is actually bound using string, bookbinding thread, it is a lot easier to remove everything. I don't have to cut it out carefully. So what you just do is you find the center of each signature, you bend the book back slightly, and you use a seam ripper to cut the threads, and then you carefully pull out the pages from the signature until you get to the ones that are glued in, and then you just move on to the next signature. This way you can not only keep the spine intact and treat the book a bit better, but you can also reuse the pages of the book in your journal or in any other projects that you might have. So it's better than tearing it out. That way you don't have to kind of stitch them back together again. Um, so yeah, you can also use, instead of a seam ripper, if you don't have one, you can use a small knife or small pair of nail scissors, as long as it's something that can really get into a tight space. Once all the unglued pages are out, it's time to take out the ones that are part of the text block that were kind of glued in. I very carefully pulled out each of the pages and removed the excess glue and bits. I wanted to keep the end papers, so I was very careful when I pulled the text block bits away from the end paper part, as you can see here, because I wanted to keep them intact and in the actual cover. So it's just a matter of being very patient. If it's a little stiff, you could use a heat tool or a warm blow dryer to just kind of loosen the glue a bit. But in this case, the book was old enough that it didn't require too much work to try and get everything out with just a little bit of help with the corner of my seam ripper there. I was able to actually detach everything quite easily in the end. So then you're just going to carefully pull out the rest of the pages and you will have your cover ready to go. Once I reached the last bits of the text block to pull out, I decided that I wanted to keep the head and tail bands and the ribbon that was used in the bookmark ribbon, because I wanted to use as much as I could of the book in the actual book as well, if that makes sense. So, having done that, it was now time to decide what to do. Obviously, I want my journal to be a bit thicker than the original book that it is. So, I decided to carefully cut the two cover boards from the spine. But I also wanted to keep part of the spine to use in the actual book. So I did it very carefully so that I could keep the actual spine binding part um, intact, so I could then use it inside the actual book. Then I gave everything a little trim just to get rid of other bits and make sure that everything was then flush with the edges so that I could add on a new spine. My next step was to get a piece of sturdy cardstock in order to make the spine. Here I was just checking the grain of the stock just to make sure I got it the right way around. And I'm just going to take a couple measurements and decide how wide I actually want the spine to be. Um, in the end, I believe I went for a 2-inch spine, possibly. I think so from the looks of my ruler there. So I went for a 2-inch spine because I knew it would become a bit chunky once I add a few bits to it. So here I am just marking my 2-inch marks so I can make a nice straight cut. For the spine and get it the width that I want. Once the spine was cut, I just double checked it to make sure it was the right height and that everything was more or less flush. You will see I do trim it a little bit later because it was just a tiny bit over. But I decided to make my life easier and just use some tape to start making the shape of the book before I covered it with fabric. This is just to make life easier and faster. It might add a little bit of extra strength to the spine for the future. I don't know. It is just paper tape. But I have discovered, and thanks to Sarah Lee Armstrong, I will link her channel below, a great trick for making sure that you have the right width between your in the crease, in the gut, basically, the gutter, between the spine and the covers. And that is to actually lay your spine on top of your cover and then glue it, because the flipping of the spine is actually just what it needs in order to turn properly. So this way you don't get too much or too little spacing in between. And I just thought it was absolute genius. And I never would have thought of that myself, to be honest. So yeah, I will link her channel below. And yeah, she's absolutely a genius. So anyway, after I had attached the spine to one cover, I trimmed off the excess tape. I then decided that I wanted to also put some tape on the inside part of the cover, but obviously since this one would probably be visible, I went and I chose a washi tape that I felt had that same kind of Victorian vibe as the rest of the book, and I just popped that in carefully as a decorative but also extra bonus kind of support for the spine and the gap. And after I had done that, I basically just repeated the same process with the other cover and the spine. With that done, it was time to get to the more fun decorative part of the book spine. So I chose a fabric that I had received in Happy Mail, and it is an upholstery fabric, but the colors were just perfection and the design is beautiful. I don't know that I would have that on my sofa all year round, but I certainly know that it would be perfect for my journal. So I simply measured out a piece of the fabric that was the right width of the spine and of the masking tape, because I wanted to cover it, and that was the right height. I then glued it down using fabric glue and really got into those gaps to make sure it was well attached. And then I used some clamps just to hold it in place, and I left it overnight, folded in half, like that, so that it would fully dry and that it would still have that space that it needs to open and close without making a lump. So now we're nearing the end of the journal cover. It's the next day. The spine is nice and dry. I've even selected my signatures, but I'll follow that process in the next video. And I've chosen my paper that I want for the spine. I've used scrapbooking paper that I have in that Christmas pad that I found at the works, and I've just measured it to make sure that it fits between the two bumps, ridges in the spine, and I just cut it down to size. Before gluing it in, I decided to, of course, finish the fabric on the spine. So I trimmed it down, mitered the edges, and just gave it a good little amount of glue. I just used PVA this time and clamped it down to hold it for a few minutes before then inking my spine and gluing it in, again with PVA. And at this point, I realized I forgot to record the next step, but I did punch some holes and put in some grommets on the front page, the front covers, sorry, of the book. I didn't film it uh, because I obviously forgot to hit record or something, as you do. And anyway, so I decided to just make a simple tie closure. I have taken some of my eco-dyed fabric and I've just cut a couple strips of it and to make ribbons and to tie into the holes that I have made. And that is pretty much it for the cover. I want to keep it simple because I think it's beautiful already as it is. So I didn't want to add too much. I might add maybe some gold or warm toned gold book corners, corner protectors on the edge. The ones I have don't fit, they're too skinny. So I might have to order some new ones, but I'll let you know if I do that in the end. I hope you enjoyed this video and stay tuned for part 2. In the meantime, happy crafting everyone. Bye bye.